Hello, I'm the Dark Master, and welcome back to my video game reviews. In today's video, we shall be covering the 14th game in the Kirby franchise, and specifically the 8th spin-off, known as Kirby's Tilt and Tumble, or as it's named in the Japanese original, Koro Koro Kabi. Alright, so before we start, I think it would be good to spend a bit of a time on how this game is a bit of a gray zone. Neither considered really part of the classic Kirby Golden Age, though it does have the visual similarities to it, especially the early Game Boy games, nor is it considered part of the Dark Age of Kirby. Much like an Ichthyostega transitions between a fish and amphibian, it is a transitional game with traits of both ages, and much like Ichthyostega, it does neither justice, honestly. But let's now talk about this game and see whether it stands on its own merits or is it best left forgotten. Well, let us start with that developmental history. Alright, so details on this game's development is relatively sparse, but from what we know, that originally it was not meant to be a Kirby game at all. Instead it was to be Koro Monkey, or Monkey Tilt and Tumble, starring a random monkey. But after a discussion with Shigeru Miyamoto, it was decided to give it a Kirby paint job, which honestly probably is a good idea as it saved it from obscurity. Development from there went fairly smoothly, with some minor changes in the English release and some very few unused sprites and really no concept art to really speak of. In the end, it was released for the Game Boy Color, the only Kirby game released for that handheld. First in Japan on August 23rd, 2000, then in North America on April 11th, 2001. So sorry, Australia and Europe, you don't get it. From what can be found out online, it seems to have performed reasonably well, being the 6th best-selling Game Boy Color game in Japan, with 563,914 copies sold, and in the end, 1.23 million copies sold worldwide. So yeah, it was quite successful when it comes to a Kirby spin-off, but now let us talk about the game itself, starting as always with the plot. Alright, so this game's story is pretty simplistic. It starts with Kirby sleeping on a cloud when Waddle Dee wakes him up walking past with a bumper. But we see Deity as, bringing his own much larger bumper, and Kirby decides to investigate, believing that Deity would be up to no good. He sees that his suspicions were proven true and that all the stars of Dreamland have disappeared, stolen by the evil King Deity, and Kirby must fix it once again, stopping the king. Man, isn't this familiar? It's almost like every Kirby spin-off game has a very similar plot. I joke, personally, I don't really mind simple stories. They can have their own charm. I mean, look at classic Mario games. Plus, the intro cutscene and ending both have a lot of charm as Kirby comforts deity despite his past actions. Plus, honestly, I think you can't really expect much for a Game Boy Color spin-off Kirby game. I mean, what are you expecting? Final Fantasy 16 levels of story? Anyway, overall, this spin-off game has a pretty solid story, but it is admittedly simple. Now let's go on to arguably the most important aspect of any game, the gameplay itself. How has that aged? Alright, so right off the bat, this game has a vastly different control scheme than your average Kirby game. Instead of moving with a D-pad, you gotta tilt the game system in order to use a series of accelerometers in the cartridge, which is a unique translucent pink coloration, by the way, in order for Kirby to roll around. To jump, you rapidly tilt the entire Game Boy Color up. Now, I've seen some describe this as loose, but I thought that it worked well enough for most of the level design, especially due to it being very broad and Legend of Zelda like in most levels. Though, admittedly, there are some segments, especially when going after some of the secret red stars, which I'll talk about later, where it can get a bit annoying, but still, I don't think it's anything like the lost levels or it's not like a genuinely hard thing. It's just something you gotta get used to. Other controls include how the D-pad allows you to now change the camera, which is the first in the series to have genuinely good camera controls. The A button causes Kirby to do some context-sensitive actions like jump out of a hole, shoot air bullets, paddle faster, and make floor sections appear in red outlined tiles. The B button makes floor sections appear in blue outlined tiles. There are 8 stages, each with 4 levels a pop, each of which introduce new mechanics. In terms of items, there are several. First, you got the returning 1-ups, which give extra lives. There's also 2-ups and 3-ups as well. There's food that restores Kirby's health. There's the power drink that heals half health, maximum potatoes, which are a full health restore, and invincible candy that gives invincibility. You might have noticed that I haven't really mentioned copy abilities. Yes, this game completely lacks them. Something not seen really since the original Kirby's Dream Land, which I've reviewed before if you're interested in learning more, but there are some items that do fill the role of copy abilities, even though they're not really copy abilities. First, there are these balloons, which Kirby can touch to fly and spit air bullets. They only last about 15 seconds. They kind of function like the mint leaf from Kirby's Dream Land, the original game. Then there is a microphone that sort of functions as a screen nuke like Mike Kirby does in other games. And there are, of course keys to unlock doors and treasure chests that can contain various food items, maximum tomatoes, strawberry cake, which would go on to become a recurring theme in Kirby games. So there's a fair selection of items. Returning to the stage, each has a time limit. Not anything super demanding, at least in the base game, but nor did I ever really come close to running out of time. Set time can be extended by collecting stopwatches, another item that can increase the time of these stages. In addition, there are several stars one can collect to get some bonuses. Warp stars take Kirby to a bonus area to earn additional lives. There's a blue star to allow Kirby to play a set of mini games, which we shall discuss in a bit, and red stars, all of which must be collected for reasons we shall return to in the last segment of this video. Going on to the minigames slash subgames, these can be accessed by collecting a blue star and then completing the stage, and also replayed fully after finishing the game by selecting the bonus star, where you can choose any of the 5 subgames. First, there's Kirby's Chicken Race, which sees the player holding a car and you charge it up by shaking the system. And you gotta charge it the right amount. If you do it for too long, Kirby will go off the edge of the cliff and lose. And if he doesn't do it enough, he will stop before the chicken does, and so you also lose. So you gotta star up after the chicken does, but before the cliff, and you will win if you can do that. It can be fun, but it can get a little annoying. Kirby's Roll-O-Rama sees you have to guide multiple Kirbys into holes while avoiding obstacles like bumpers and Gordos. The holes can be in various sizes. Large ones can contain multiple Kirbys, which is not good, while smaller ones are harder to keep Kirby in. Kirbys can only be hit twice before you get a game over, or if you run out of time. When a Kirby is hit once, they turn blue to indicate damage. This would actually return in Kirby's Mass Attack, which I shall review in time. There are 25 rounds, which get increasingly hard. Overall, it's a fun time trying to beat this subgame. Do the Kirby's basically Simon Says, and you gotta make the right movement. You get one slip off allowed, otherwise it's game over. It is fine, but nothing notable. Kirby's Hurdle Race sees Kirby having to keep, doing a sort of track race against Deity. Pressing A causes him to run faster, while flicking the Game Boy Color gets him to jump. Again, not really anything challenging, but it's still very fun. And last but not least, we got Kirby Bust a Balloon, which sees Kirby have to use a bow and arrow with 6 arrows at a time that can be reloaded by flicking the Game Boy Color in order to hit balloons, which, is also, really a very fun sub-game, arguably the funnest of them all to play. Overall, the gameplay found in this game is very experimental. I know many might not like it, but I think there's value to be said in said experimentation. Sure, it can be a little awkward at times, but once you get used to it, I find the gameplay pretty solid. Now let's go on to the presentation of the game, starting with what you see first, the graphics. So the Game Boy Color is an interesting handheld. It is still 8-bit like the original Game Boy, but now in color and with more power, meaning it can handle a bit more, leading to an interesting visual language that is basically akin to a slightly more powerful NES, with less sprite flickering in my experience. And each of the levels has a visual uniqueness that feed into the gameplay. Level 1 is your standard grassy region that, thanks to some beautiful cloudy sections and mechanical dungeon, really helps introduce a lot of common elements seen in the game in an easier format. The second world has a lot more interesting regions with more advanced level design and an orange sky that is beautiful. Level 3 is a water world with sections that see Kirby ride a raft through. The last stage is a bit annoying, having you to follow the slow robot guy as he builds a bridge. World 4 sees Kirby go through sandy regions and some cool looking, pop-up floors and tight platforming. World 5 is the ice world, and visually it's beautiful, though the ice physics can get a bit frustrating, especially when combined with floors that can vanish. World 6 is cloudy and has a lot of really neat, thin platforms that are fun to navigate. World 7 ramps things up heavily, indicated by the darker color scheme, and has a lot of really small platforms that require expertise in the controls. One level is truly hellish. World 8 is a strange case, as the first and third levels look like something from the first world, while the other two are actually genuinely cool and give off a sort of interior castle vibe that makes a lot of sense. Overall, the graphics are filled with charm, and while I do think the last world could have been a bit better, Like, really, why are there these cheerful grassy regions in what's basically meant to be the inside of a castle? But that doesn't detract from the rest of the game, which is filled with lots of charm that elevated above your standard Game Boy Color game thanks to the smart level design and really cute character design. But now let's go on to the second half of the presentation, the music, and see if that is also stood the test of time. Alright, in terms of music, right off the bat, the intro music of this game really excretes a load of charm into one's ear canals. The music from the various menus are alright, if forgettable, same with the title screen and map music. There are a number of tracks for the various stages. The basic stage theme gives off a amusingly sort of rhyme, a nursery rhyme kind of vibe, though the percussion is a bit messed up in the beginning. It's a fine song, but nothing particularly amazing. The cloud stages reuse the bubbly cloud theme from the original Kirby's Dream Land, which is always nice to hear. The water stage theme that plays is, honestly pretty good. It gives me a tropical ocean vibe. The underground stage theme is really robotic. It's an interesting song, but honestly not my favorite. The theme in the castle stages sounds like something from The Legend of Zelda more than anything else, which is, interesting. The best parts of this game's soundtrack are the theme that you get when fighting bosses, which is admittedly reused from the original Kirby's Dream Land, and the theme when you fight King Deity. Overall, this game's music is just kinda okay or meh. There are a few bright spots, but honestly, it's nothing groundbreaking, especially compared to that of other Kirby games. Even other Kirby spin-offs have better musical tracks, but now let us go on to the many foes and threats that Kirby must face in Kirby's Tilt and Tumble. Alright, so due to the lack of copy abilities in mini-bosses, I shall be diving right into the common enemies. Starting with returning ones, we got Waddle Dee, Waddle Doo, UFO, Squishy the Squid, Starman, Shotzo the Cannon, Kaboo, Big Kaboo, Gordo, Bronto Burt, Broom Hatter, Cappy, and Mr. Frosty, who has been reduced to a surfer. Other returning enemies include Poppy Brothers Juniors that come in a blue and faster red variety. There's also Flotso and Bueller, which have not been seen in some time. And last but not least of the returning foes is Snipper from Kirby 64, which I've reviewed before if interested about learning in that. The ending of that video was sadly taken down due to some BS copyright strikes from Pitmonk X, so I'm really sorry about that, but that video is already long enough, and I don't really think it hurt the video, but I understand if the sudden black screen was a bit jarring. I'm really sorry about that, and I'll try to avoid that in the future. Sadly on topic, as for new common enemies, there's really only 4, sadly. Blink Bat is this blue Cyclops bat that will chase after Kirby if it sees him, and can only be defeated by Mike Invincibility, otherwise you gotta just hide from it. Honestly, it can be a bit annoying at times. Then there is Cloud Cannon, which is a Shotzo variant that is carried by a balloon, whose expression changes in pain as it gets hit. It takes 3 shots to kill it. One of them holds a red star, which you do need to collect, but honestly, most of the time it's just better to ignore them. Then there is the Block Bot, which comes in 3 variants, red, blue, and yellow. The red and blue ones move and can be influenced by being bumped into or flipping the handhold. However, the yellow variant can only move if its button/switch is pressed. The last common enemy we see Kirby face is the God Hand. No, not the ones from Berserk, but these sort of glove guys. Overall, these common enemies of the game are just kind of meh. They have some, fun designs, and they function more like obstacles than actual enemies, but luckily the actual bosses are a step up, at least, Some of them are, as there's sadly only really three distinct bosses. Starting with the weakest of the trio is the Orb Zervor. This race of critters has to be some of the simplest design for an enemy in video game history. I mean, it's basically a checkerboard patterned orb with a single eye. There are a few variants. First is a green one, which moves slowly and attempts to push Kirby off the stage. When angered, it's found in the first world. The brown variant, fought in World 2, jumps around, making the floor fall apart on contact. In World 5, the orb observer is blue, and the fight takes place in an icy arena. Said arena is arguably a greater challenge than the fight itself due to the ice physics, and last but not least, we got the level 7's Gray Absorber, which tries to push Kirby into spikes and moves a great deal faster. The hardest of all the orb observers, but still not really much of a threat. It is a perfectly fine boss, but it's so easy and has such a simplistic design it leaves no real impact on me, and has to be the most forgettable boss in the entire series. Luckily, the other two bosses are really good and are returning foes. First is Krako, who you fight twice. He continuously summons Gordos to try to box Kirby in, while also releasing little co-Krakos, or in the case of his second encounter, lightning bolts. You gotta use the balloon power-up while fighting him, which leads to a genuinely fun encounter. No idea why we fought him twice, though. It seems like a wasted potential / padding. You could have easily put in a different boss in the second encounter. Or better yet, use Krako Jr. However, the best encounter has to be the final boss, with King Deity. He will collect his star and be invincible in this state, swinging hammers at Kirby if he gets too close and charging at him. One must use the cannon in this arena to beat him by hitting him in the back to knock out the star so he is vulnerable. Once down to half health, he'll start chucking his hammer like a boomerang, and once he's hit enough times, he breaks down crying. Honestly, it's a really fun encounter that's genuinely challenging due to the need to use the cannon, which up to this point has appeared in other levels but was never really a big deal. Overall, though, when it comes to the enemies of this game, much like with the music, it's just kind of middling. There are good ones, but most of the new additions are just kind of meh or mediocre. Now let us go into the completion requirements and my final thoughts on this amazing game. Alright, so in terms of completion requirements, in each stage there is a red star hidden somewhere. Since collecting them is the only completion requirement, let's go a bit more in detail than I did with the last review of Kirby 64 and the Crystal Shards. In the first level, it is tucked in the upper right corner near the goal platform. In the second level of the first world, it is located between the gate and exit, which can be found near a small island platform, guarded by some Bronto birds. Level 3 has it where it is behind a bumper that can be destroyed by an invincibility power-up. Oh, and bumpers are an object I didn't really talk about before, but they basically function as you'd expect, bumping you either upwards if they are red or laterally if they're blue, and there's also a bar variant. It's fine. Lastly, the fourth level has the red star where the block bot in the lower right corner is located, and you gotta get them to move out of the way to get it. Going on to the second world, the first level, it's hidden behind the bumper bar, and you need an invincibility to get it. The second level has it on the blue path, hidden behind some short walls and a bottomless pit. You'll find it easily if you look for it carefully. Level 3 sees it near the first gate. Simply ride the cloud up to the top and then hop down the middle. Lastly, on stage 4 of World 2, you gotta use the invincibility to knock away a bumper, which reveals a square hole, which will then, shoot Kirby to the right and get the red star. World 3's first level has the red star being held by Mr. Frosty, and you gotta chase him down. The second level has it on a narrow side path at the end of the first wavy section. The third level has the red star held by a squishy past a narrow waterway to the left of where Kirby got on the raft. The fourth stage sees Kirby stay on a cloud longer than he normally would be, which floats to the left in order to get to the red star. In World 4, the first level has it located after the first narrow bridge down to the left in the next sand pool to reach a small grassy area where the red star is. The second stage has you get it by taking the more dangerous path to the left. In level 3, there's a very narrow brown rockway which, if you carefully go over, you reach an isolated platform where the red star is. In level 4, you got to use the invincibility power to destroy 2 bumpers to reveal a hole, which grants access to another small room which holds the red star of that level. In World 5, the first level, there is a narrow bridge blocked by a bumper, which leads to the red star. The second stage sees an arena which has another small area on the right side blocked by a bumper, which has the red star. Stage 3 has a star hovering in the sky, and you gotta time a jump to get it, as it can be a little awkward to obtain. Level 4 has a small elevated side passage which holds the red star. It's actually relatively easy to get this one. In World 6 Level 1, there's a side room blocked by a bumper that holds the red star. In Level 2, there is a narrow bridge guarded by an annoying UFO enemy that leads to the red star. In Level 3, there is a red star held by a cloud cannon, and in Stage 4, the red star is down a narrow walkway near the left facing conveyor belt in the first area. Going to World 7, in Level 1, right before the last major area, there is an area to the right with disappearing red floors. On Stage 2 of World 7, there is a series of jumps leading diagonally rightwards. Using the temporary invincibility, you must burst the bumper to obtain the red star of this level. In the last stage of World 7, there is a cloud to the right of the room going on to the red star. On the third stage of World 7, and I saved this to doing last because it's actually arguably the hardest to get in the entire game, there is the red star, which is located by riding a lift past the platform and getting off on a separate platform or further along. It's the hardest to get in the entire game, which is why I discussed it last. Moving on to World 8, the first level's red star is on an island platform. The second level has it, on a jump area that will help him get to a part of the area that's cut off where the red star is. This third stage of World 8 has Kirby encounter a long bar bumper in the middle of the room where the star is hidden beneath and you gotta destroy it. The fourth stage has a series of jump holes that can be followed into the abyss of the left side, which leads to a small platform with a fragile wall that leads to the final red star in the game. After all these red stars are collected, the extra mode is unlocked as after beat King Dedede. This extra mode is sort of like a new game plus with several changes. There are more bumpers, bombs are scattered around that cause damage and send Kirby flying. Key locations have been changed. Stage buildings, especially boss arenas, have been altered. Some enemies and clouds move faster. The orb observer in World 2 is swapped with the one in World 4. Planet Popstar is now reddish instead of yellow, and the bonus mini games can now be accessed on the world map. Luckily, all the red stars are in their old locations, and after collecting them all a second time, the background of the title screen turns pink, and you get a cute little screen that praises your committance to beating this game. Admittedly, not the best reward, but hey, it's a way to get more out of this game. Overall, what are my thoughts on this game? Well, sadly, much like your typical transitional species, say Ichthyostega, this game has a number of growing pains that definitely hamper it. The story is perfectly fine, if not particularly new or engaging. The gameplay is something either you really like I do, or don't. I like this game's gameplay, but I can understand that people who are not into Kirby may not. The graphics are very charming, but the music and enemies are mostly just kind of alright or average, with a few bright spots, and the completion requirements are a bit tedious. Still, I think this game is perfectly fine. It's like, you know, short spin-off that really any Kirby game fan should really try at least once. And even if you're not a Kirby fan, I think you'll enjoy trying it out, at least for a bit. Sadly, due to the game's controls, there are very few ways to play it. Unlike most of the previous Kirby games I've reviewed, there haven't been many re-releases. Outside of the original release for the Game Boy Color, despite having a notch on the top right corner of the cartridge like games that are meant to be compatible with the OG Game Boy, it won't actually work on the Game Boy, so that's a bit of a misleading thing. You can technically play it on the Game Boy Advance, but due to how the cartridge is inserted, the controls are inverted. And you can also technically play it on the Game Boy player for the GameCube, but honestly, I think manhandling your GameCube like a boiled chicken seems like it could damage it, and I would highly advise against doing so. Luckily, recently there has been a re-release for the Switch Online service, first in North America on June 5th, 2023, and then the next day on June 6th, 2023 for Japan, the EU, and Australia. So finally, you at least have a cheaper option. Regardless of how you play this, you're likely to have a okay time. Anyway, but don't feel bad if you decide to skip this game, as admittedly, it's not what I would consider the best that the Kirby series has to offer. Anyway, I'm the Dark Master, and if you like this video, like it, but if you loved it, please consider subscribing and have a wonderful day, as I have plenty of videos I think you'll enjoy if you like Kirby or nature.